Oh, it stands up. All right, cool. Or we can put in another chair. You looking for a front row seat, Justin? Okay. Okay. No, they're fine. We're like.
Oh, I do that.
Hello. I would invite everyone to grab a seat. And we're going to get started. I apologize for starting a little late for anybody online. The reason is that there is a concert next door and the parking is pretty scarce. Can you hear me better now? You want to hear me better? Okay. Anyway, so we're starting a few minutes late because the parking situation was pretty poor outside. We need to ask someone to turn the music down. If you could please, thank you again. Welcome to the October meeting of the 28th Ward Regular Democratic Club. Welcome to everyone who is here at the Moonrise in the Loop and to anyone who's watching us online. We're really grateful to have you here. My name is Ann Kitlos and I'm the president of the club. And I'd like to introduce the other officers who are here, starting first with our alderwoman, Heather Navarro. You can't see her online, but she's right over there. Our vice president and committeeman, Mike Gross. Our committeewoman, Gail Thorwell, who's gone out to take care of technical issues. Our secretary, Deborah Lovelace. Christina Bennett, our treasurer, doesn't seem to be here yet, but she may show up. If anybody wants to pay dues for 2022, any money we collect from here forward toward the end of the year is applicable toward your 2022 dues. So that's $20 a person individually. And if you pay online, we appreciate another $1 or so to help cover some of the costs of the online bill pay. I would like to invite everyone to sign in. There are clipboards in a couple places around the room that helps us to know who's here, keep track of our members, but it's also important when we do endorsement votes. You need to meet certain criteria which are available on our website, in our bylaws, for how you become eligible to vote. But the most important is paying your dues and coming to a couple of meetings. If you are online and want to sign in, you can do so in the chat on Facebook, and or send an email to the club. Write it into Facebook that you attended, and we will count you as present. We encourage people to wear masks if you're not eating or drinking actively. We're trying to comply with the city regulations, but also keep each other safe. so that we can continue to have these in-person meetings. I'll put my mask on in just a sec. Our topic tonight is the main topic, in addition to our elected officials and others who will be here, is talking about our federal infrastructure investments. We're getting a lot of money from the federal government for infrastructure projects, and the city is working with community volunteers to figure out how to prioritize that money. And our alderwoman has been figuring out, talking to lots of people to figure out exactly what's going on, and she's going to share that information with you right now. Heather?
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all tonight. We're actually going to change things up just slightly because Alderman Todd is here with us, and I want to give him a chance to speak to you all. He's been in meetings all day, and would love to give him a chance to talk to all of you. Some of you know, if you've been coming to some of our meetings, that in light of upcoming ward reduction, we wanted to give a chance to our members to get to know the other aldermen. And so we've had Alderwoman Peel from the 17th ward, and we have had Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard from the 26th ward. And tonight we have Alderman Todd, and I'm sorry, I can take this while I'm speaking. Does this help? Sorry. And tonight we have Alderman Jesse Todd. He is the alderman of the 18th ward, which is just to the north of many of you in the Central West End. And I'm going to give him some time just to explain a little bit about his ward, tell you a little bit about some of the things that are going on there, some of the things that he's working on. And I think he'll take a few questions, and then we'll dive into the exciting topic of the Capital Committee. Alderman Todd. And I just want to say, too, as he walks up here, that even though he's relatively new to the board, he's very familiar with city politics. He's been a long-time committee man for the 18th ward, worked very closely with Alderman Kennedy, which some of you probably know. So thank you for being here with us.
First of all, thank you, Alderwoman Navarro, State Representative Kimberly and Collins, and thank you all, 18th Ward members, for inviting me. As your Alderwoman said, I'm a long-time resident. I know the 18th. I know Terry, he knew me when I was a kid, and I can you imagine how long it was to be. I started off with as a kid with the deposit program many years ago, and developer, and so I've been around well forever in politics. So I was 18th Ward Democrat committee man for 20 years, well, for the treasurer. So I've been around, and so in the 18th Ward, mostly I'm working on development. We've done a lot of development. I've been, in fact, probably more development than anybody else. Not bragging, I'm just talking about my record. Probably about a total of $1 billion when I count the anti-poverty program development, as well as the working with Alderman Kennedy's daddy. I worked with his dad, so I knew him when he was shooting marbles. So I worked with his daddy and worked with him. And development is one thing that I've been doing, as well as you probably know, capital improvement. And we also have a lot of services that you probably know, request stronger residents, as well as getting jobs and doing whatever other kinds of services that are necessary. So I know the 28th ward when it was the 25th ward. I don't know if you remember Henry Stoller, Mary Stoller, and going on back to there, Dave Helen, when he became alderman. And so I had that honor working with those people many years ago too. So I'm very familiar with the whole history of the Central West End as well as North Delaware. So basically, that's what I do. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer. I'm glad I was invited. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. I know you have other things too, so I would rather have the questions. So if there are any questions, yes, Art.
What are your thoughts about redistricting?
Well, my thoughts, first of all, I have to be honest, I think was I didn't support it when they said redistricting, because I think the first thing is that it's going, it has passed already. First of all, it passed. I disagree. On the Central Committee, I fought it, tried to defeat it. I tried in '83 before I became a committee man. They tried to get some petitions. I had defeated in 2004, and then I tried to defeat it in 2012, but it failed. And we tried to get. I I raised over almost $40,000 through the Central Committee. I was treasurer to try to get it defeated, but I couldn't make it work. So I'm 100% against it because that's like saying, I'm a classroom teacher that's my profession. Catholic County, city. I retired from the city. It's like telling me, you make my classroom twice as big, you're going to be a better teacher. That's just not true. The services are going to go down. Some people here are not going to like it. Started off in 1957 with big business. They tried it in 57, then 83, then 2004, and then 2012. But then so it means that you're going to get bills. We have more problems. They're going to say, well, the population got smaller, but we have more problems. The problems happened, I don't know if some of y'all even old enough, when we happened in the 60s when people moved out of the city, ran from the West End. You couldn't even hardly give away a house in the West End, not even $300,000-$400,000. Out there when they would give you one. I remember a house right down there on that used to be called the Friendship House on that Pearson. $3,000 now worth $400,000. What is my point? My point is we need the Aldermen, the only part-time they gave misinformation. If they ever told the truth, I would be for it. They said they're gonna save money. It's gonna cost more money, but less services. And so first of all, they didn't give accurate information, so I'm against it for that reason. Secondly, the services are going down. Thirdly, the city, there are thousands of places that the city could cut today and you got for example, you have 2 inspectors for one ward. Well, if you're trying to save money, why do you need to? I could go on and on. I heard all the person say, where $20 million could be saved. Well, I just got there and I know where a lot of money could be saved too, so they're not trying to cut the money. What's gonna happen is it's gonna cost more to run, and the politician gonna be out raising money, and the service is gonna be neglected. The other thing that's gonna happen, they're gonna be more beholden to the business interests, and you're gonna have less participation. And with Proposition R, which passed along with those 2 competitive primaries, it's going to cost a lot of money. When you got a lot of money, I'm not sympathetic to business people running things. And I don't want any business people telling me, people with a lot of money telling me they've suffered enough. I would like to suffer like you suffer. What I'm saying is you're not going to have a right, and you shouldn't have a right to think that you know what's best for everybody else and stop. I want the least of thee to participate. I want the least of thee to be taken care of first. And that's the people that I represent. Everybody I represent, a broad cross section of the middle class and the Central Western black and white, and I represent the poor people. Until we solve the problem of the poor people and stop creating problems for the poor people, then we're gonna be right back where we started when I first went into the Central West End, when you couldn't give away a house. Poor, and the Bible is right. The poor will always be with us, but they didn't say you have to starve the poor to death. So until they are saved, nobody's going to be saved. So with me saying this, cutting the wars is only going to help a handful of people, and so I'm against it. And I failed in trying to stop it, but I did everything, including my money, where my mouth was, put my time in. I did everything, and we'll do everything, because it's not in the best interest of the public. It's in the best interest of a handful of people who had a trickle-down theory that don't want to be accountable to anybody but the people who want to make some more money. And human beings, they remind me of the golden calf, and I do not worship the golden calf. I'm a follower of Jesus. And thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Todd. Well, and that concludes our adjacent Alderman speakers. So, hopefully you all will get a chance to either watch some of the Board of Alderman meetings or committee meetings if you'd like to get to know some of the other aldermen. But I'm very grateful that Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and Alderman Todd were able to join us at our meetings. And you just know, Alderman Todd, you are always welcome. I will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you for your service. Well, and tonight, we had a few different speakers lined up to talk with you all about what's going on with the Capital Committee, especially in light of the fact that the city of St. Louis is receiving so much in federal funds. And just these days being what they are for one reason or another, each one of them was not able to join us tonight, but lucky for all of us, the Forest Park Advisory Board meeting got over early tonight. So I had about an hour and a half to dive into the Capital Committee, who just met earlier today and did take a vote on the recommendations and a plan that will now be moving to the Board of Aldermen and the Board of E&A. So I talked to the budget director, I talked to the mayor's chief of operations, and I talked to Alderman Oldenburg, who's also on that committee. So I'm feeling pretty up to speed, and lucky for us, we have someone in the room who knows even more about this topic than I do. Mayor Krewson is here with us tonight, so I may lean on her if there are any questions that I cannot answer. But I thought I would just start off letting you all know a little bit about the Capital Committee. So we plan every year, there's a 5-year assessment of our capital needs. And there's an advisory committee of citizens that we are authorized to convene. In most years, our needs far exceed the resources that we have. So it's pretty much, triage down there. We look at our most critical needs, try to make sure we have money to cover those, but there's not a whole lot of, discretion in terms of what else can be done. This year's a little bit different in that respect, in that we are receiving almost $500 million from the federal government. So it's coming in 2 different payments. We already have allocated a certain amount of that. It came out to, after the mayor's most recent veto, it came out to about $123 million that's been allocated. And a lot of that was for direct assistance, rental utility assistance, rent, mortgage, setting up vaccine clinics, doing small business loans, all of these sorts of things to respond directly to COVID. So that was the first package. And now the Capital Committee has been looking at what to do with this second tranche of funds. And there's going to be, and this is even just the second phase, there's going to be more. So but this Capital Committee has designees on it from the mayor's office, the comptroller's office, the Board of Aldermen, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is Alderwoman Davis, sits on this committee. The president of the board has a designee on there. And so they meet to make a decision, make recommendations essentially that then go to the Board of Aldermen. There was a citizen advisory committee convened this year, and every alderperson was able to appoint two people to sit on that committee. And from the 28th Ward, our appointees were Jason King, who lives in the Central West End. He's got an urban planning background. He's been very helpful as I've been looking at other projects in the ward. And then also Paris Clark. She's a block captain in Skinker de Bolivar, very engaged in the neighborhood. And so both of them sat in on those meetings and participated. And unfortunately, they both were not available to be here tonight, but they did send me some of their notes. So in addition to those two, like I said, there are representatives from wards all over. They met every week from, I believe it was, July through September. So they were a very dedicated group getting on Zoom. They had presentations from all the various departments. They asked a lot of really great questions. And then they ultimately filled out a survey that went to that Capital Committee who just met tonight to vote. So just to give you an overview of the funds that we're talking about here. So we started off with $500 million in the ARPA funds, that's the American Rescue Plan funds. And as I said, about $123 million of those have already been allocated. There are 17.3 million of that we used to cover projected lost revenue last year. It turns out we actually ended up with a surplus at the end of last year. So half of that surplus is getting combined into this capital fund. And the money that we had set aside to cover lost revenue, we're gonna be able to put that back into the fund as well. But so we were looking at about $108 million, $108.8 million is what this Capital Committee is looking at. They ended up coming up with recommendations for about 86 million of that. So there's still going to be another round of funding. So this is the first round, and what I have is hot off the presses. This is not the final plan. So the Capital Committee votes, and then that goes to the Board of Aldermen, to the Ways and Means Committee, then to be voted on by the entire board. It also goes to the Board of E&A Estimate and Apportionment, which is the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the board. So I don't have clarity yet on what the order of that is. And if any of you were watching the allocation, board bill number 2, I believe it was, with the first allocation of funds, there was a lot of back and forth. But I do sit on the Ways and Means Committee, so I'm excited to be able to dive into this even more. But what I can tell you, so from Jason, who was sitting on the committee and diligently attending all of these meetings, he highlighted some of the themes that came out of there. Which were, looking at, we have this major backlog. Anybody who's been driving on our roads knows we've got a major backlog of capital improvements that need to happen, but also looking at how we include equity in the decision-making process, how we prepare our city for a changing world. So thinking a lot about climate change, how can we be transitioning to an electric fleet, for example, and also just looking at, one of the themes that came out of the Capital Committee was just the role of this advisory committee. Like I said, this is the first time in many years that we've been able to have citizens engaged, I think, in such a meaningful way. And so a lot of people just had questions about how that was going to work. But there is a really great, it's like 32-page presentation online of the survey from the folks who are on that committee and their comments. And I was reading them over earlier today, and I was very impressed with the time that people took on this committee and the depth of their comments and the forward thinking that they put into this, which I think is really important. The first bucket of funds really was just responding immediately to COVID. And now we have this chance to really look forward. And what I want to know is, what I want to be able to do is in 15, 20 years, point to something and be able to say, this is here because we put this money to work for St. Louis's future. So that's what this is about. So they had presentations from a variety of departments, like I said, and the priorities focused on the water division, which actually has their own set of funding. So I don't know that we're going to see a lot coming from these ARPA funds for the water division. But presentations on water division, obviously we have a lot of old infrastructure there that needs to be dealt with. Bridges, parks, recreation facilities, forestry, and public safety. So critical items, and you can see where this came out in their surveys in terms of what they prioritized. Roof replacements, so everything from roof replacements at rec centers to engine houses. It was amazing how many of our buildings in the city just need new roofs. Fleet and vehicle purchases, and so this counts for streets, refuse, parks, and I've talked to the parks director, and we've got all these great picnic tables that are available for events, but when you've got to move them one pickup truck at a time, it takes a very long time, and that's where a lot of our staff end up devoting their time, is just driving these old vehicles. And I know we all heard, I think it was 2 summers ago, just all of the broken down refuse trucks, and luckily we were able to get on a schedule to start getting those replaced, but we still have a lot of work to do there. Justice Center repairs. I'm sure a lot of you have been reading about what's been going on at the CJC downtown, the issue with the locks. So there's a lot of upgrades that need to happen down there as well. So that was high on their list. And bridge work. And one of the big ones I know that we're all thinking about is the 2 bridges at Union and Lindell. And so those are on this list. So there's a bridge that goes over the Metro Link, and there's a bridge that goes over Forest Park Parkway. And so both of those are on here as well. So those, that's kind of what the advisory committee gave their opinions and their recommendations for. And so that ended up being broken down into several categories. And so what was voted out today, and again, this is not final, but just to give you an idea of kind of where things are, looking at about $4.5 million in streets, and that includes the cycle track down on Tucker. This was an exciting project. I just started digging into this today, the Tucker cycle track. So it'll be a bike, walk, bus improvement project downtown. Go online, just Google it. And this is just a small piece of it. Really, I think it's maybe GRG. There are other big funders for this, but this is just a small piece. It's like 300,000 of what the city would be putting into this much larger infrastructure project. But about 4.2 million for LED streetlight conversions. I think that's pretty important. We've done a lot of lights in the 28th ward, but we still have a long way to go across the city. And then bridges, we've got the Lindell and Union Bridge over Forest Park Parkway, Lindell and Union Bridge over Metrolink, and then another 2.8 million for bridge repairs. And then there's a Compton Bridge that's also high up on this list. Parks and recreation's on here, and a lot of this is pool renovations, rec center roof replacements, rec center boiler replacements. So a lot of this is just getting these facilities you know, up into the present day here, which is going to make them so much more accessible. And when we talk about how important it is to get kids into after school activities, we've got to have a safe place for them to go where they don't have to worry about mold or leaky roofs or all of these things. So, you know, a lot of this is stuff we don't see. And I think that's the hard part, is everybody's like, oh, $500 million. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, bells and whistles, and that's all really important, but we've got to take care of these really basic fundamental things like buildings and vehicles. And if we don't have those, the programs that they serve, you know, aren't going to be successful. So, and then there's a lot in here for the fire department, police department. A lot of this is buildings and equipment. And so, I mean, that adds up about 21 million for those. And then, like I said, corrections, public safety, so the CJC, and then a lot of the civil courts buildings, getting new equipment there, a lot of air handlers, water service, asbestos abatement. And again, I have to say, the citizens who sat on this weekly committee, just week by week, I mean, just imagine what it's like when you've got to replace some sort of appliance in your house. And think about that, you know, 100 times more, just week after week, hearing about all of these old things that need to be replaced. And then it looks like 9 million for city vehicles. And then there's several other priority items on here, some arterial paving. None of them are in the 28th ward, and that is definitely something I want to follow up on, because a lot of the ward, we expect ward capital to pay for a lot of paving. And that can be helpful on residential streets, but as I was just talking with the previous alderwoman about, we've got Skinker, Kings Highway, Union, Delmar. These are not small residential streets that can be paved with, you know, $20,000 or $30,000. So we need to find a way to get those funded as well. And as I said, this isn't all of the federal funding. There's still going to be another branch or tranche, as they're calling it, of funding that we need to work with this current half, you know, and there's still going to be the other half of the 500 million coming next year. So we are just going to still be having discussions. There's still going to be opportunity to get these projects in there. And, you know, Alderman Todd brought up ward reduction. And I think one of the issues he brought up is that right now aldermen are kind of the liaison for so many city services. And so that is something that we need to be thinking about as well. That system needs to change and be updated with a smaller board. And so as we're thinking about how these capital funds get spent, we also need to be thinking about how that works in a new system with 14 aldermen. Because as long as aldermen are deciding where speed humps go and which blocks get paved, it's going to be a piecemeal approach. And I think there's a much better way for us to look citywide with comprehensive planning and put the experts in charge of which streets need to get paved next, where the speed humps need to go, and let the aldermen actually serve in a legislative capacity. Obviously, still very important that aldermen are, you know, our liaisons to our constituents, but these capital improvements cannot be done on a ward by ward, block by block basis based on, you know, however much money you've got left in the pot at the end of the year. So that's kind of the overview here. So it's about 82 million. As I said, it's going to go to the Ways and Means Committee, where we'll debate it at the Board of Aldermen. Also has to pass out of the Board of E&A. So we still have a little ways to go, but we do have to spend it relatively quickly in order to get the next installment from the federal government. So that is something else that I've been asking the Ways and Means Chair for. Just let's get updates on what we've allocated so far. You know, how many families have been able to access the $500 direct payments? How many families are getting the rental assistance and utility assistance that we need, so that they need? So we need to get some follow up on that, and then really get moving to make sure that our city departments are getting these funds, so that we can start to see new streets, better parks, better buildings, know that our firefighters and our police officers have the equipment that they need. So I'm happy to take questions if I haven't put you to sleep yet. Yes, Anne. So and the question is about the Union Lindell Bridge. Essentially, you know, where are we with that? And there have been some preliminary discussions. If you went to the Great Streets, any of those open houses that they had, there was talk about a big glorious roundabout. We are, so the city this fall is hiring a planner to start that planning phase. So anything that we've seen up until now has essentially been a concept or an idea. It has not been vetted by engineers. So we don't know that it will work. But we are hiring an engineer or a design firm with the idea that over the next year they'll start looking at what's possible there, and there will be community engagement. I do know that they are going to consider whether a roundabout would work there, or maybe it will just be a typical intersection. One of the things that I've been learning about roundabouts is that, while I think they're great. I've spent a lot of time in Europe and they work really well. For pedestrians and bikers, it can be a little trickier, and especially at an intersection right next to Forest Park where you have lots of people using that intersection to get through there. It just makes it a little trickier. And you've got a lot going on there with Forest Park Parkway, Lindell, and Union. So it's going to be tricky. So we've seen some ideas out there, and those will get vetted over the next year, essentially. But there's nothing planned yet other than the money is being set aside. We do have federal funds set aside for that. And many of you know that work was done on the bridge in the last year or so. So, I mean, it's safe to travel over and everything. But we do need to get it up, and we need to get that process going soon. And the city is on top of that. That does remind me, though, one other thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of the infrastructure capital needs of the city. So, like I said, every year they do a 5-year assessment essentially. And when I looked, I think in September, the assessment was we had $433 million of capital improvements that were needed in the city. 433 million. We're getting 500 million over 2 years, but that's not even going to begin to cover everything. And so of that 433 million, 176 million is critical. So those are streets and bridges, things that need to be repaired ASAP in order for us to continue using them safely. And then there's another 201 million that's considered needed. So it's not critical right now, but if we don't take care of it soon, it will become critical. And then about $55 million in desired capital improvements. So just to give you some perspective of where we are and how lucky we are that this federal money is coming to us, because we really do have a backlog of projects. Yes.
Yeah, well, so this is betting about long history of city stewardship with city. I mean, to allow this to get to the point where things are literally falling apart and needing $400 million worth of investment. City that's lost a dramatic amount of its population. I appreciate the alderman about business, but he has to understand where the money will come from. A lot of taxes, earnings taxes on people who work for business. Right? So my question is, what guarantees do we as taxpayers, I as taxpayers, have that the city is going to be able to appropriate these funds and use them, and then be good stewards in these improvements for the next 10 years, and not wait for the next pandemic to come along and pray for the federal government to bail it out?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I'll repeat the question. Did you have your hand up? Did you want to answer? I will. Yes, I will definitely let you jump in. Let me repeat the question for the folks online. So, so the question is, one, how did we get here? Why do we have such a backlog? And given that we have such a backlog, what sort of what should taxpayers think about our stewardship with the current funds, given that we're in the situation we are now? Is that an accurate sum up? Bob said much more and was very eloquent, and I just summed that up very quickly. I'll just quickly say, I think you mentioned some of it, and that we've had a major population loss. And when you look at the numbers of people that the city has to, that we essentially have to take care of, the poverty numbers that we have, and so much of the tax revenue has left the city, and the city-county divide means that you've got taxes being raised. The people who live here are shopping outside of the city, and so the tax base is completely off kilter. I mean, and I could say more about that, but I'm happy. Well, no, I'm happy. So but what I can say is that the folks who are there now, I think everyone, having served in government just for the 4 years that I have, I can say you're not here unless you profoundly care about the city, because it's a very tough job. And I think that, moving forward, we have good assessments and evaluation of where the needs are. We were able to engage the Citizen Advisory Committee, which I think was very helpful. And we're going to have some really robust discussion. And I find hope in the fact that we are moving forward with ward reduction. I think that that is a small step of reform that is needed. And I'm not saying that 14 is the magic number, but I think that with 14 folks down at the Board of Aldermen, we can start evaluating what is the role of aldermen, who is taking care of constituent services, how can we be doing that better, what sort of reforms do we need in government to function more effectively as a city of around 300,000 people. So I see that as one step of reform that we are doing to recognize that we are a smaller city population wise, and we have some real issues that we need to grapple with. I mean, it's a great question, and we've got to figure out how to get our population back up. We have major infrastructure in the city that needs more than 300,000 people to pay for it. We need to be able to work out something with the city and county, figure out what's going on with our tax base. We can't just keep sending all of our revenue out to the county, and we've got to figure out how to get more jobs for the folks who are here so that they can be earning more, and we can, as a city, we can be earning more. I don't know that it's not the magic wand, but yes, well, I appreciate the question. Absolutely. Yep. Well, and the one thing that COVID has done for us is everything's on Zoom and online. So as long as you've got access to the internet, you can be watching your elected officials pretty much every day. There's something going on down at City Hall, and hopefully that's adding some transparency. I was amazed at what I was able to find online about the Capitol Committee today. All of the documents that were on there, all of the minutes, everything. So I encourage people to dive in, and I think it's going to be really important with ward reduction. All 14 wards are going to be up at the same time. So people are going to have to do a lot of research. One, you're going to have to figure out what ward you're in now, and who knows, there may be 4, 5, 6 people running. We don't know what this is going to look like, but it's going to be important that who's running, what they've been doing for the city so far. And I think that's going to be important in terms of the decisions that we make in 2023. Yes, Gary.
Say a word about
So the questions about Lindell, I'm just going to first ask if there are any other questions about the Capitol Committee, because then I'm happy to dive into all sorts of board updates. But is there anything else about the Capitol Committee? Yeah, Bob. Oh. Sorry, Mark.
See, I would venture to say that a large part of our population decline is due to public safety issues, particularly in the last several years. I personally know several Boeing engineers who live downtown who, after the 20 fiasco, they pulled up and moved down. Okay, these are people that contribute a lot of earnings tax to the city base. I'm sure they're not alone. So without public safety, none of this matters. Please describe what in public safety will be addressed with capital money.
So the question is about specifically what in the public safety bucket or what's allocated and planned for in the public safety bucket. And I'm going to be honest with you that I just got this spreadsheet today. And most of the things that are on here have to do with the CJC improvements, and it says PSAP. That's you. PSAP. It's the. Oh yes, that's right. Okay, so the dispatch 911 dispatch center. So there's about 2.2 million in there, plus another 1 million that's going to come from an Eco Devo fund. So that's mostly looking the list that I have was mostly CJC, and then the 911 dispatch center, and then a lot of building improvements and some equipment. I don't have all of the details on that, and I'm happy to follow up. I can put together something on my blog as I get more details about this. And I would encourage you to watch the Ways and Means hearings, because we'll have presentations on all of this and have a chance to jump in deeper into all of these.
hazard a guess what percentage?
I don't know if I want to do that because there's the way this is broken out, it's like vehicles, buildings, that sort of thing. And again, this is not final either. But I mean, the point too that Bob was making that I think we all agree with is that public safety is key to so much. I mean, whether it's business development, whether it's stabilizing neighborhoods, and whatever the topic is, people have to feel safe and secure. And so that is definitely got to be a piece of everything that we're working on here, and definitely a priority, I think, for everyone at City Hall. Marv, did you have your hand up? Good question. So the question is, you know, right now, the alderman and ward funds go to so many of the different capital needs. And if, you know, we want to move away from that, how do we transition? Because that's been so integral to the role of the alderperson for so long. And I would say, I'm not looking to get rid of all ward funds. I think there are certain things like streets that, you know, need to be looked at more holistically. I think there are certain capital needs that should be directed through those departments. Now, there may be specific projects that I think aldermen and neighborhood organizations should have some say over in terms of how those funds get spent, whether it's, you know, amenities in a park, if there are certain forestry, you know, parks and forestry is one that just comes to mind right away, where I could see that you might want to leave that decision-making power with the alderperson or, you know, with the neighborhood organizations. But I think some of these big capital improvements, we're in the situation we're in because just as an example, I believe last year we spent around $2 million paving streets. You know, that's coming from the ward capital funds. That's nothing. You know, and I'll get to your Lindell question in a minute. Paving Lindell, I've been told it's $300,000 just to straight up just pave it exactly like it is. $300,000 for a 2-mile stretch. We get around $350,000 a year. If, you know, if we're lucky, if the taxes work out and we don't have a pandemic, we get about $350,000 a year. So you can imagine if aldermen are using those funds for capital needs, you know, it's all gone. You don't get to the fun stuff. So I think that money really should be pooled, and I think we can start thinking about that. I think we can look at more capital money and those funds, and start to say, you know, we're going to pool these monies and they're going to go to streets in terms of paving. What I would really love to have in all of this is some sort of analysis or assessment, the age of our streets, the use of our streets. When I go into the ward capital meeting and I say, okay, what streets need to be paved next? It's really based on, well, this is where we got the most complaints. We don't have a recent inventory of streets that says, this is the last time these streets were paved. This is the average vehicles per day. This is where we're seeing the most accidents. This is where we get the most calls about potholes. I mean, I'm curious how much money we pay out every year in terms of damage to people's cars from potholes. I would love to see that analysis, but I think we need to have a hub for that. Right now, those decisions get made by alderpersons, so there's really not a big drive for the streets department to have that information because they know the alderpersons are going to ultimately make the decision. Anyway, so I think it is going to have, I think we've got to break it down and recognize that there's a lot of different needs that can be funded from that. So thank you. Good question. And again, if you feel free to jump in. We've got someone with 20 more years experience as an older person than
Every level you go up, or it gets skimmed off, I'm now excited. I can understand why some projects need to be done on a citywide basis, but frankly, I have no problem with boards and the older person and their designee or their committee or the citizen action member trying to make a decision based on their experiences, their neighborhood, what needs to be done.
Yep. No, I hear that comment, just echoing that there are certain things that are, it's better to make it the smallest level. The principle of subsidiarity. Yes. Yeah, why don't you take the.
I realized the scarf I picked up tonight says, 04E. Anybody remember that? It's been around for a while.
So anyway, I was just gonna say, Bob, that one, I hear your frustration and, about, well, why are things in this shape? I think that was sort of the start of your first question. This city has been, we probably have a meeting here. This city is on the verge of being broke for many years. I mean, that's really the truth, is that you can't make things better with no money. So, you know, you can want to pave this and this and a street in the 26th ward, but honestly, you don't have the money. I mean, population's been going down since the 50s. About a third of our revenue, the city's revenue, is from the earnings tax. Certainly not all of it. We've got a lot of sources, and you're interested, so you would be probably interested in going online, going to the budget tab, and you can. There's several different books, okay, or files. There's one on revenue, shows you where all the revenues come. If you're really interested, go there and take a look at that. So I don't put the condition of our streets or even our firehouses. We had a bond issue once for firehouses a while back, where I don't put that on, you know, Mayor Shamel, Bosley, Harmon, Slay, because when you don't have money and the only money that you can spend on capital is such a small amount for what your needs are. The capital needs have been $400 million ever since I've seen that list, which has been a long time. We do some things, we do the most urgent things. And when I say we, that doesn't include me now, I'm just speaking the city. So that's kind of number one. You had a second part of the thing that people are, this has been true in my many years, everybody wants to talk about streets. Anybody want to talk about streets? But there's so much more. And yes, streets need work. And if you live on a little street like where I live or where many of you live, and it needs paving, they come in and they mill off, that's the machine that grinds up they mill off a couple of 2-3 inches, and they put a couple inches, 2-3, whatever it was, back down. That's not so expensive, but you cannot do that on Skinker, Del Mar, Union, Kings Highway, Forest Park Parkway. So, you know, it's just Lindell even. You just can't like put a little skim coat on your roof that's leaking. Sometimes you gotta fix it. So anyway, I'm excited that the city has over $500 million, and that's, you know, coming through. It's not that's not your through the federal government. We also got money earlier that $78 million, but that wasn't for capital. And don't forget, this $500 million that we're getting, it's not all for capital. Alderwoman Navarro was just telling you, okay, the capital committee has met on this. It's for many other things, and it does have to be COVID related. So the city, we've gotten about half of the 517, or I don't remember the exact number, a little over 500. We've got about half of it sitting in the bank. I hope, too bad interest rates are so low, right? Because I hope the comptroller or the treasurer at least making us a little bit, right? But anyway, and then it has to be spent by, if my memory is right, the end of 2004. Where are we? on one. I think it's, or is it three? Five? Yeah, I had it too. I just, some of this stuff has gone out of my head now. So, there are other opportunities. So, it's not all about capital. It's not all about streets, although those things are very important. I get that. But, it's about a lot of other things as well. And this is a real opportunity for our city and for our people. It's both about capital and about how we can help people. So anyway, that was all I wanted to say. Oh, I know the last thing I was going to say. Alderwoman Navarro was talking about ward capital money. The reason that money is split up is because it was in the ballot language during Bosley administration. So I don't know what year that was, 92, 3, 4, somewhere along in there. And it is a 0.5-cent sales tax. And half of it goes to citywide capital. It generates, I think I don't recall, 10 million a year in total. Or I don't know. I can't remember that number right now. It's very close. It doesn't generate as much as you. No, I got it. 0.5 cent generally generates 20 million. It hasn't in the city. It has not in the last couple of years because of COVID and all that. But half of that, so 8 or 9 million, gets split 28 ways, or soon to be 14 ways, and 8 or 9 million. It's not a lot of money. I mean, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but 8 or 9 million goes to citywide capital. All this, by the way, for anybody, I happen to be a numbers person. You might be too. Anybody really wants to know, it's all online under the budget tab. But anyway, a lot of people over many years going, I can only go back to Shamel, who of course came out of this ward, but everybody in their administration has done the best they can. It's just like, just like our households. You can only spend what you got. Anyway, and the end. Thank you all.
I did just look it up. So we have to spend it in 5, but it's got to be under contract in 2. And then we have 5 years to spend it. That's what I was told. I'm just going to take a few more questions because I know we've got some other elected officials in the room. I will just briefly mention Lindell. We talked about it last month. It came up. So there is a website, the city's website. If you put Lindell in the search bar, Lindell Streetscape Improvements comes up. So you can go there and check it out. At this point, I guess the update here is that for several years now, there's been conversation about redoing Lindell, looking at the lanes, maybe doing some sort of reconfiguration. And the Great Streets Project specifically recommended going down to 1 lane in each direction to improve pedestrian safety and reduce speeding. Because over the years, especially when when Highway 40 was closed, Forest Park was closed for a while, Lindell got picked up a lot more traffic. People started using it and really racing down it. We had speed radar signs on it. Over 80% of the traffic was going over 40 or something. And because that street is so integral to people being able to access the park, we've got so many pedestrians, so many cyclists, as well as you want the drivers to be safe too. My daughter turned 16 today, so I'm very aware of what it's like having a kid driving around in the city of St. Louis right now. So speeding, and I'm not saying that Lindell is the worst street for speeding, but over the last several years, as we've been looking at what to do with Lindell, speeding and pedestrian safety has been at top of mind for sure. So we did hire a company a consultant engineering folks to look at and vet, does the traffic volumes, does it merit going down to 1 lane? What would that look like? How would it work? So they came up with a plan that's posted online right now. We did just receive some more feedback, and there's going to be another version, I believe, of that coming out soon, and then there'll be one more round of feedback. It's not fully funded yet. I have allocated a certain amount of work. I've allocated $300,000 from work capital because that's what it would take to pave the street. But the initial project that came back pre-COVID was about $1 million. It was beautiful. It had a cycle track. I loved it. But COVID hit, board capital wasn't there, and also just there's so many other needs. So we came up with a Lindell to MLK. So, you know, we'll have, as soon as that's ready to go, we'll be sharing that with the public as well. And part of the reason that that's so important, we do, again, going back to population loss, we have so many miles of streets, we have so much pavement. And then when COVID hit, we don't have the same traffic that we usually have, which naturally slows some people down. So we need to start looking at our streets, looking at this pavement, thinking about how we can design our streets better. Traffic enforcement's key, but also having streets that are just designed better for people to go slower. It's going to be a combination of those things. But definitely every time I talk to the police captain, I tell, you know, the number one safety issue that I hear over and over, I know we've got violent crime in the city. Absolutely. We also, people just need to be able to cross the street without worrying that they're going to get killed. So, yes.
How understaffed is the city's police department?
How understaffed is the city's police department? As of today, you know what? I used to get regular updates on this. I haven't recently, but I would say we're at least 100 to 200 officers down.
When I left office, there were 200. The budget last year was 1,340 officers, and you know we had. But I don't know what this year's budget looks like, but I know we've reduced. The plan was to reduce it by 100, but at least 200. And you know, Paul, I think the question was from Paul, is that right? Or maybe not, but whoever asked the question, it's online, what our police force has been over the years. And, you know, it's very controversial, of course, but, no, that was Murphy down there. Okay, very controversial, but, you know, we need more money for mental health and we need more money for cops. And our cops are paid $10,000 less than a county cop on average across all, you know, detectives, sergeant, you know. So there you go. I'll stop.
So the question was about understaffing. Yes,
Very understaffed.
Very understaffed. I know one of the things that I've heard Safety Director Isom talk about is, you know, what are all the things that our police officers are doing that don't need to be done by police officers? I mean, even things like taking a report at an accident. After the accident's happened, you know, is there somebody else who can show up, provide any sort of, you know, relief services, but also just take the report and get it into the system? I mean, that takes hours. And do we need to have our police officers doing that, or is there somebody else who could be doing that? So I know we're looking at how we can reallocate some of those resources and get, you know, get more funding, social services, all of that plays into it. But all around, I would say it's understaffed still. Yes.
Right. Question about, you know, accidents on Lindell. Looking at the Missouri State Highway Patrol from June 1st to May 31st, there were 98 accidents. on Kings Highway between Forest Park Expressway and Horton. 204 people were involved, 40-some people were injured, 1 people dead. If you look at the same statistics on Lindell, there were 3 accidents, and there was nothing about speeding in any of the reports. So the emphasis on Lindell compared to the disaster we have on Kings Highway, I just don't see what the emphasis is.
I completely agree. Reducing traffic on Lindell is a lot easier than reducing traffic on Kings Highway because, I'm sorry, yes. So the comment was just in terms of the number of accidents on Kings Highway far surpasses the number of accidents on Lindell. And nobody's disputing that. The thing is, all of our streets need upgrades. I mean, not, some of them have recently been paved. You know, McPherson was recently paved. Union's looking great these days. But overall, the streets in the 28th ward and throughout the city need to have various improvements on them. And, you know, we do them as we can do them. Kings Highway is not going to be fixed with, you know, a couple $100,000. And so Lindell has not been paved in a long time. It's due to be repaved. I bike down it because it's much faster to bike down Lindell than it is to wind through the park and go up and over the bridges when you're trying to be somewhere in 10 minutes. And I mean, I can tell you, I mean, as a driver, as a cyclist, if anybody, you know, the traffic department will tell you, yes, Lindell is due to be repaved. So that's going to need to happen. And so my thought is, why not take this opportunity to make the improvements that we can? Kings Highway needs a lot of help, and that's why we have engaged a consultant group as well. Let me just, that's why it just makes it harder for the people here to do too. And so we are working on Kings Highway. I know when Mayor Pearson was the alderwoman, she had allocated funds as well to do a Kings Highway study. There's the other thing that we've learned just in looking at Kings Highway, the width of the street from intersection to intersection varies by like up to 10 feet. So it's going to be an intersection by intersection sort of design plan. Now, in terms of getting traffic enforcement out there, absolutely. I mean, I harp on that all the time. We had speed radar signs up there. Those don't work so great for 6-lane roads, honestly. And once they're out there for a few weeks, everybody forgets that they're there. So, you know, we tried that. We need to get more enforcement. We're going to get a better design, but it's just so much more complicated on Kings Highway. And so I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to fix one street just because another street is worse right now. But absolutely, I totally agree with you. Kings Highway has got to be fixed. When I lived in the Central West End, my kids were little, I wasn't worried about them getting kidnapped or, you know, anything like that. I was worried about them getting hit by a car on Kings Highway, and I still am. My daughter sometimes bikes to high school. She bikes to Rosati. We had, you know, she's got to go through that intersection at Kings Highway in Lindell, which is just horrible. We had a friend in from out of country. He was on a bike, almost got hit by somebody running a red light at Kings Highway. I am with you. I completely understand. It's going to take traffic enforcement. It's going to take better street design. It's going to take better education. Just let me get my one more plug in here. Driver's education is not required in this state, and it drives me insane. If you look at the numbers in Illinois versus Missouri in terms of pedestrian deaths, driver deaths, they are butts. And part of it is if you want to get your driver's license when you turn 16, you've got to take a driver's ed class. It's got to be like a semester long. And I'm just going to put that plug in here. You know, we're just doling out a driver's license. And I know because my daughter's going to take the test on Monday.
30 seconds, Alderwoman.
30 seconds. Here, take the mic though, because these folks can't.
Well, it's okay. There is you think about the options that you have for going east and west in this city.
You have quite a few options. You've got highways, you've got Forest Park Parkway, etc. Part of the reason this is such a gnarly problem for Kings Highway, and you know, I live half a block off Kings Highway, and when I walk, I cross it a couple times a day. How do you go north-south in our city? Grand, pretty far away, that's 3600 block. Kings Highway, that's the 49 or 5000 block. Union, yes and no. Union doesn't go anywhere south, okay? I mean, you gotta think about through streets. Skinker, yes and no, goes south better than it goes north. It turns into Kindland. And I don't think that's going to change because we're a 100% built up environment, but that is part of the problem with Kings Highway. And I agree 100%. I don't think you should wait 3 seconds. I think you should wait 10. And then when I cross, which I generally cross at McPherson and Kings Highway, I am always looking straight at those drivers. I don't know if it does any good or not. And then I give them a little wait. All right, guys. Thank you all.
All right, I'm going to move us along. Sorry, the tangled mic. We have our two state legislators here, and I don't want to limit the amount of time that we will give to them. They've given us their whole evening. So I want to give Wiley Price, representative of the 84th District, which is most of the 28th Ward, the first opportunity to speak. And if we go a little bit later than our 9 o'clock, would you please stick around so that we can also make sure to hear from Kimberly Ann Collins.
I'll spare the people of their time, and I will give Kimberly Ann Collins my proxy.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for joining us this evening. We
Here to
appreciate
listen
it.
tonight.
Kimberly Ann Collins of the 77th District. And
I cover a lot of 28 Ward too.
do you like, that was more,
But I cover a lot of 28 Ward.
Yeah, everything.
you cover most of the state most every day, so.
I'm trying to, I don't know if I like that you said Wiley cover most of the 28 Ward.
You remember on the east side.
Huh? Yeah. I cover a good amount of the 28 Ward. I want all my, I got all those votes. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what to talk about because we've been on legislative break, but I'm Kimberly Ann Collins.
Tell us about you getting thrown out of prison.
Okay, I represent the 77th District, proudly representing. I am a freshman legislator, and I've been doing a lot this legislative break. I also send out weekly 77 District newsletters. I never miss a beat every Friday morning. So if you are subscribed to my email list, you will be getting that email tomorrow morning. It's gonna have a lot of stuff in it. Okay, so I got kicked out of Bonne Terre. I never even made it in the doors. So I do prison pop-ups. I keep telling y'all about these prison pop-ups I've been doing. I do sit on the corrections committee for the Missouri House of Representatives. We have not had a lot of correction hearings because we just have not had a lot of correction hearings, although there are a lot of legislators that filed a lot of bills around criminal justice reform as well as prison reform myself. However, I'm gonna push for a lot of bills to get put in committee this session because I think that it's important that we do have these committee hearings. But I went to Eastern Reception Diagnostic Center when I was a little girl. We called it Bonne Terre Correctional Facility. I never made it in the doors because they told us that we were not allowed into the facility because there was an execution going on and the facility was on lockdown. But we got confirmation from CO officers as well as a couple of inmates that they were not even on lockdown. And come to find out that day it was 2 inmates that overdosed. So that probably was one of the reasons why they did not want myself to enter into the facility. State statute says, and I don't have it memorized, I don't have the number statute memorized, but state statute says that a state legislator, a judge, prosecutor, anybody in the governor's cabinet can enter into a correctional facility at any time for any reason. I fear that when we go back into session, because I've been utilizing that state statute for pop-ups, I'm praying that nobody decides to just change that state statute because I like it because I can just pop up at any time. However, we were invited back the next day to come. I just did not go. Then I made it my business to go down 4 hours to Chillicothe Correctional Facility where I was checking in on our women inmates, where they do have a lot of concerns. Yesterday, I went back to JCC for the 6th time, and I engaged in a policy session with a couple of the inmates, like Lamar Johnson, Bobby Bostic, and a couple of other guys who are serving some lengthy sentences, and we got a chance to talk about different pieces of policy that could potentially move people through the system instead of keeping people stuck in the system. So we were talking about reducing the 80, well, we're just talking about it. It's nothing set in stone. What would it look like for the 85% to be reduced to 66% for first-time violent offenders? What would good time credit look like for violent offenders? Because right now, violent offenders in the DLC facilities are not qualified to earn good time credits. What does it look like to have a clemency advisory committee to where the governor is not the only person to grant clemency to an individual? What would it look like to have DOC oversight? Because right now, Department of Corrections has no oversight and nobody's holding them accountable, which we should be holding them accountable. So we're looking at all of those good things. I also got a chance to sit down with inmates who are in the NAACP branch, the NAACP prison branch, where they invited a lot of legislators. I just happened to be the only one to show up. They paid for the food out of their canteen funds. And so I ate all that I could. And then what I did was they packed up my car, the COs packed up my car, and then I took the rest to our pop-up shelters down here in St. Louis because I felt bad that the inmates utilized their canteen funds to pay for the food. And it was catered food, but nobody was there to eat it but myself, and I can only eat so much. So that's what I've been working on as far as prison reform. I'm also working with, I'm working on some animal legislation. Going back to the incident that happened with 4309 Delmar, where we had that dog that had been in that house for a number of years. We finally did get the dog out, but it's still an ongoing process and a work in process. So I'm working with Humane Society, Missouri Alliance for animal legislation. We're working on some different animal legislations linking animal abuse to child abuse to domestic violence. So we're looking at those studies. I have a training coming up next Friday that I'm quote unquote speaking at. Although I don't know much about animal abuse, I know I love animals. And it's kind of like I didn't know much about politics, but I knew I love people, so I figured I would be good for the job. So I'm hopeful that I would be good at maneuvering some legislation for animal abuse. And my chief of staff just walked in the door, so I just want to introduce her. So this is Dr. Nash. I want you to come up here. So this is Dr. Nash, my chief of staff for the 77th district. And she will be helping me moderate the town hall that we have coming up. We do have a town hall coming up on October 23rd. That is at Rankin. I did bring some flyers with me, so I'll just pass it out. It is included in my weekly report. It's going to be on Missouri Department of Corrections. It's going to be on prison reform. We're going to be taking some input from residents, allowing an open discussion for people to give their thoughts, ideas, concerns, address them, bring them to us. Hopefully we can help, and hopefully we can take their ideas for legislation input into consideration and go ahead and do what we do for the upcoming legislative session. We get the pre-filed bills December the 1st. Session starts on January the 6th. And I want Dr. Nash to introduce herself because she is not my chief of staff, but our chief of staff for the 77th district. And I just want her to explain her role. Other than that, I've been working with a few developers. We are working massively on a development plan for MLK. And of course, I know you all saw in the news that we're trying to bring a grocery store to MLK and Taylor. So we have been working on that, been in our meetings. It's a good day, 77 district, because we've been working hard. So, Dr. Nash. Oh, anybody got questions for me? I'm shocked. Nobody got questions for me? No?
Okay, I'll ask a question.
Okay, come on.
All right, so anyone who I really appreciated the comments about traffic enforcement. I didn't think there was any more traffic enforcement in the city of St. Louis until a recent story about that poor officer that was hit during a traffic stop. I think that's the only time I've ever heard of any traffic enforcement in the city in a year. So along that lines, one of the things that I think maddens all of us that go around town is the proliferation of expired temporary tags. I mean, it is, if you want to talk about a pandemic, it is a pandemic. It is an endemic here in St. Louis. And Charlie Brennan has been harping about this for years, and nothing seems to be done about it. I saw one that I was behind a car the other day that was 2 years expired. Okay, so the question is, this is cheating taxpayers out of funds that the state is due, right? And when I contacted Alderperson Navarro about this, she informed me that it's really a case of the police don't do it because the state won't enforce the law. And so I would like to know what you know about this problem and what you think can be done about it.
That's a good question. I can't sit up here and tell you that I have an exact answer for you. And I don't know everything as a state legislator. I'm still learning. So maybe I should give my proxy to Wiley. Because you nodded your head like you know what you did.
I knew that question was coming, that's why I let you take it.
I'm happy to look into it. I don't know every answer. So
I didn't expect you to, but the fact of the matter that nobody seems to know the answer. So I've actually tried to contact the state on this too, and it's just like crickets, right? The fact of the matter is that there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax money that's gone wanting because of the lack of enforcement. And if the city police feel like there's no point in enforcing it because the city will not prosecute, or the state will not prosecute, then who can blame them, right? They've got more important things to do. But the fact of the matter is the tax money is gone wanted.
I will say this, Bob. The state likes to play local politics matters until they have to actually act on it, or until it's politically advantageous for them to act on it. I hear all the time in committee and on the floor, local politics, let's let them figure it out, let them figure it out until it comes to our prosecutor, our police residency, our anything that has to do with St. Louis. I mean, you can go back to the $15 deal. You know what I mean? When we passed the $15 minimum wage, and they came over top of it and said, no, you can't do that. It's got to be a statewide deal. So they pick and choose the issues that they want to. And it seems like the things that would actually move the needle in our neighborhood, they pass on. And the things that, again, are politically advantageous for them, those are the things they want to jump all over. So as far as expecting the state to actually do something that is going to be worthwhile for the community, I mean, it's just, if you believe that, I can see the argument. three easy payments could be yours.
I lived in Illinois, and we didn't have any such thing as temporary taxes. I mean, we had to pay our temporary license. We had to pay everything right then before you could leave the dealership. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know why.
Which is why a lot of Missouri drivers have no license plates.
Well, and it's, the state allocated funds to update the system, but it's gonna take 2 or 3 years because the car dealerships, they don't want you to pay the taxes at their dealership because it's gonna make the price of the car go up. So they've been fighting getting the system in line, but my understanding is that legislation passed to upgrade that system, so you will pay for all of it at one time, but it's gonna take a while for them to get the computer system. I mean, this is the excuse of the day, right? The computers won't do it.
Yeah, but meanwhile.
Right, no, watch the cars running through the red light and see how many of them have paper checks.
Yeah. Did you want your big staff to say hello?
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all. I'm Dr. Nash, Dr. Melissa Nash, and it's so good to see everyone. I've had about 3 meetings today, and all of them were Zoom. So I'm glad that each of you are here and we're in person. I am the Chief of Staff for the 77th District, and that entails whatever you all need from our office. We're here to provide. As you know, State Representative Collins is usually in Jefferson City. So I am here boots on the ground, and not only to problem solve, but to also partner with you in any capacity. So we're here as a support system. So when you think about our office, just think about another support and aid to whatever it is that you all need here in the 77th District. So thank you for having us, and I look forward to working side by side with each of you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
concludes our meeting to
I
really.
got two quick updates.
Oh, so, excuse me, we're not concluding the meeting.
Just, can you hold this though?
Yeah. Mike Dross, committee man.
Sorry. Got that.
Just while he's getting his stuff, next month, November, we're gonna be talking about redrawing lines, city lines, state lines, get updates on redistricting and word reduction, as well as updates on the new school board members.
Right. Just real quick, I just want to let you guys know 2 events happening. Tomorrow night, the state party, there's going to be a Senate race 2022. And Lucas Kuntz, one of the Democrat guys running for Senate, he is having a fundraiser at some friends of my wife's at the Park Royal on Lindell. Just, right there in the 4600 block of Lindell, 5:30 to 7:30. Just a meet and greet. If you want more information or if you want to go, just let me know. I will send you the information. This is not an endorsement. I have not made any kind of decisions or I've shaken this guy's hand one time. I don't, this is not an endorsement at all, but he is going to be in the board. So I thought I'd let you guys know. And then the state party is doing a series of town hall meetings across the state. They do these things every once in a while. And one in St. Louis is going to be on Monday, October 25th from 7 to 9 at the Communication Workers Local 6300. It's in Bridgeton, I think. And I can give you the address for that as well. And then, like Ann said about redistricting, yeah, I think that will be an important thing. And it's just important. I was just going to clarify earlier when Art asked about, Alderman Todd's thoughts on redistricting. He started talking about ward reduction. And then we also have Prop R coming, but that's going to happen after any maps are drawn now, if that happens, which might not, probably not. So we'll get more clarification on that next week. But we're over, so thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next month.
We just had Marion.